So today I'm delighted to be joined by Helen Jenkinson. Her story is unique, definitely unique to her, and one that will resonate with most of us here. So from junior nurse to chief nurse for the Birmingham area. Without further ado, let's introduce our guest for today. So without further ado, let's introduce Helen Jenkinson. Hello, Helen.
Hi, Ange.
So what I'd like to do, because obviously you've got such a fascinating story that I think people don't see the other side of what we're about to talk about. So what I'd like to do is bring you right back to the beginning. So over to you.
I suppose my story started as a 17-year-old girl, really. And if anybody remembers the 1980s, I remember we had big hair and lots of hairspray. So I shared a bedroom with my sister who sprayed lots of hairspray while I was asleep, and I decided I needed to leave home.
Okay.
So whilst people decided they wanted to go into nursing because they had a burning ambition or a desire or they wanted to help people, I actually wanted my own bedroom. So I applied to be a nurse, and don't get me wrong, there was the ambition there. There was the family that had been in nursing for many, many years. The trait was there, the understanding was there, the desire was there. I'm flippant about the bedroom, but it was a real thing in the 80s. And I applied to many hospitals across the country, but I wanted a university hospital in a city. Yeah. I came from a small rural village. I wanted to see the different side of life. So off I went to Leeds, which was the first one that came back with a yes, you can go, the early start date. So I started in February 1987.
So you were 17?
I was 18 when I went. So it was the time to go. You could start your nurse training at 18 in those days. And they were very strict about the entry requirements, and they were very strict about a lot of things in those days. So
obviously a lot's changed.
And much has changed.
Since then.
Much has changed.
So you did all your training up in Leeds, was it?
All my training was done in Leeds, and then I stayed a bit longer and got my first staff nurse post in Leeds. And then unfortunately my father was poorly with a long-term condition, which led me to go back to the Midlands and work in the Midlands area and around Birmingham. And then my career took hold in the fact that many nurses specialise, in fact most nurses specialise. So my special vocation was infectious diseases and infection control, infection prevention.
Right, so that's why we end up where we are. So if we can then talk about, what I'd like to do is work out how the heck you get into infectious diseases, what made you go down that avenue. Let's start there.
I think I was very interested in my nursing career to understand not just the people in the beds that I was nursing, or the people in the community, or the children in the local schools, how they were developing. I was interested in the wider public health issues. So I wanted to understand why we're still living with infectious diseases in the 2020s. Yeah. So in the late 80s, early 90s, I wanted to understand how things worked and how infectious diseases were still alive and well in Western society. The big impact for me was HIV. So when I was first nursing in a city, HIV was silently creeping. And if you'll all remember the adverts of the tombstones and everything else that was on TV that made us frightened to even look at somebody, let alone have a relationship with them, the HIV noise was getting louder and louder, and that gripped me and fascinated me and interested me in how we were, one, dealing with it, two, dealing with it internationally, and three, dealing with it in our country. And what was being said and what was not being said fascinated me really with HIV, around the numbers, around the spread.
So taking what you've just said, why is it, I mean, obviously I'm going slightly off piste here, but what is it? Why aren't they eradicated, infectious diseases? Why are we still living with them?
I think, well, antibiotic had a great impact in the 1950s, and obviously it started off in the 1940s. But in the 1950s and 60s, we started to see the emergence of antibiotics. And I think, if I'm absolutely honest, not to go into the epidemiology of it all.
Yeah.
It's about the infections are racing faster than we can keep up.
Right, okay.
So, and that's why we are where we are. So let's take what we've just all been through, which is COVID-19. So
stop that, go back. So you're going to go fast forward on your story, and I don't want to go back to your infection.
Okay.
So HIV then, because obviously that was very relevant when we were growing up and we were young adults really, and sort of courting and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
So how the heck can you, because I would look at that and think, how do you start any relationship with anybody if you're absolutely in the thick of the HIV, knowing what you knew?
Yeah, I suppose the interesting thing about HIV is we were frightened of it when it first came out, but I continue to be fascinated by that, by how the spread was. I suppose how do you go out and insist somebody wears 2 condoms? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, sorry.
It's what we didn't know that fascinated me, how the spread was, where it started, how it all emerged, how it spread so fast, and who it was spreading to and with.
Yeah.
So then the concept of public health and understanding started to come into my being, and started to work as a public health nurse, which took me to understand why certain groups of people were infected, certain groups were not infected, how things were spread. And then right the way from HIV, I found myself dealing with a school full of head lice, now a prison full of scabies. So that wider public health, who gets affected by infectious diseases, was gripping me.
So as part of the NHS, obviously you then went into infectious diseases.
Specialised,
so you were going into prisons then?
So my remit was prisons, nursing homes, schools, residential homes. It was hospitals. It was anywhere where there was a gathering of people. Yeah. Took me down that public health route. There were single issues that we had to deal with. Meningitis was a big one in those days, and different strands of meningitis.
Was that when you had, because obviously you're a mum with 2 children?
Oh, yes.
So was that when your children were small? Because I remember the MMR vaccine, they were talking about that, not to give it, to give it individually.
Yeah, and that put me in a very difficult position as a mom in the playground, and people knowing what I did for a living was a very difficult. So if you're having it, I'm having it. If you're not having it, I'm not having it.
Oh my God, yeah.
So that was quite controversial. Both my kids were vaccinated with MMR because obviously I'd seen measles, mumps and rubella in the true sense, and the impact of what it could cause. And today we're starting to see the rise of measles again. To me, is horrific in this country. Yeah. But we're starting to see the rise, and the vaccination was definitely the way forward for my
I know that your children are the same age as my children.
They are, yeah.
And so I remember the only person I could revert to was my mum. Yeah. So I sat with her and she just said, I've lived through measles, watching people with measles. You've got to do what you've got to do as a mum, what you think is right. There isn't a right or wrong. You've just got to go with it and make a decision and just do it.
Absolutely. And it's the same with whooping cough. It's the same with chickenpox. It's the same with all the childhood illnesses. The childhood vaccination programme in this country is second to none. It's robust. It works, and we need to take advantage of it. So there are many countries across the world that still don't vaccinate their children.
Which we were just loosely talking about. We were off air. So let's go back to...
so I'm now in public health.
So you're in public health, yeah.
Which took my career across the nation, across the world. I have spoken in countries all across the world about the risks of infectious diseases and infection spread. The most memorable one was going to Singapore after the SARS outbreak. So listening to their experiences of SARS that didn't really touch us in this country to the numbers that it touched the eastern part of the world. So in Singapore, it was very interesting to do a 3-week lecture tour in Singapore and talk to all the hospitals and universities in Singapore about our experiences of disease. The international sharing of information around infectious diseases is a wonderful thing that we've got, and it's alive and well. So my career took me to London. It took me to leave Birmingham, come down to London to work very closely with the Department of Health, and we worked very closely on MRSA in hospitals, spending a lot of time in hospitals around the spread, the prevention. And again, speaking nationally and internationally, particularly around the Clean Your Hands campaign. If everybody remembers the Clean Your Hands campaign, where we were encouraging people to hand washing when dealing with vulnerable people, and in society in general, there's nothing beats a good hand hygiene programme.
What I find interesting, and the reason why I wanted you on to talk to you, because you've got such a fascinating, obviously we're the end consumer, if you like, aren't we?
Yeah.
But then I'm talking to somebody who is on literally the front line, but not just of what's happened, what we all went through in 2020, but going back to that, because I certainly remember MRSA and all of that, and the HIV.
Angie, I suppose what my question back to you then is as we crashed into COVID, why didn't we remember the lessons learned from HIV and the lessons learned from MRSA? Because
why didn't we?
It seemed to become all new to us, that the concept of washing your hands, the concept of using personal protective equipment, the concept of wearing masks, it seemed to frighten people and become all very terrifying. My question is, the messaging in the HIV time was exactly the same. It was just as dramatic, with tombstones on the TV. It was just as exciting in our world, really, in the fact that we've got to work fast and get that information out to people. Yet we seem to have forgotten all the basic
what do you
concepts.
think it is? Is it a political thing? Is it because people always assume that they know better? I don't know. You tell me, what was the official, unofficial? What do you think?
I think there was many things that went on at the time of Covid-19. I think we got a new government in that hadn't been in government before. I think new ministers in health. And that's a whole different story for the time of COVID.
The thing is, though, what I'd like to do is specifically now, if you don't mind, talk about the COVID, because from going from Helen infectious diseases, you had a specific title and a specific role. But how does somebody somewhere sit there and go in the little book, I know we need to call Helen? So tell me about that call. Tell me how it all came across.
By the time Covid-19 came in, I'd gotten out of infection prevention and I was a chief nurse in Birmingham again, back to Birmingham again. But I was a chief nurse in Birmingham, so responsibility and accountability for a whole population, because I worked in the commissioning arm of the NHS. For everybody that's listening, that means I was looking after, again, the prisons, the nursing homes, the everything that sits outside of an acute hospital was my responsibility.
So the general public of Birmingham.
Absolutely.
Should we use it?
Yes,
that's
absolutely.
About it, isn't it?
And everybody that knows Birmingham, you know it's the second city. It's highly densely populated, it's multicultural, it has a high number of prisons, it has a high number of high schools, it's very, very densely populated. So when Covid-19 come, and I talked to some of my colleagues that were in South Wales or in Cornwall or in Derbyshire, Peak District, they didn't quite have the same experience as COVID as I had.
No.
They weren't losing colleagues on the front line, and we saw people that were nursing with us 1 minute and were not coming to work the next. Young mums that were dying as a result of catching COVID in the early days, porters dying, people that were directly related to that front line, as you talk about, doctors, etc., losing their lives as a result of the COVID problem.
Sorry, can I just take you back a minute?
Yeah, of course.
So I'm really fascinated by how they got your name. So all of a sudden they went like, there's Helen Jenkinson.
Wow,
did they get
that's
all
quite interesting.
So did they get all like the person from Birmingham, London, Manchester, and get you all together?
Oh yes.
So go on then.
So there was a daily. So we started off with 4 times a day calls that we would all be on those calls. The nurses that led each conurbation, each area, each district, if you like, would all come into those calls to be briefed and updated
by the government,
directly by the government about what their decision was.
You had?
Yeah, by their decision. The chief nurse of England was also on those calls at the time, and the chief medical officer. That were all facilitating those calls to be able to, and their teams would facilitate those calls. So there'd be directives that would be coming from the government. We'd be giving feedback on our numbers and our data and our what's happening, what's real. So anyway,
all those people are on your Zoom calls, okay?
Always on the Zoom calls.
So you're all on the Zoom calls and you're all pumping into this machine and telling them all that's happening in your area.
Yeah.
So then were you responsible? So you all had to sit there, and we all know about the PPE and all of that went on, because I remember...
Do you?
I do. Well, I only know what I know. So I can't ask you those questions, but I can tell you what I did, obviously, for me in C Residential, when we went round collecting, and there were people in Rugeley making masks, and, you know, we were all collecting them for our local hospital and stuff like that.
And this, remind me again, this isn't a third world country, is it?
It's not a third world country. No. I know, that's a very good point. So, OK, so you're all on those Zoom calls.
Yeah.
Then what?
So on a positive note, it was incredibly informative. So we would learn what one area is doing and mimic that information. I think the most powerful information came from Italy. Do you remember when the nursing homes were all had COVID first? And this was long before the lockdown in March. We received information about what was happening in Italy, and we were able to learn from some of the mistakes that Italy had made, and they were very open and honest about some of the information that they were giving us about what they could have done better. Being all on a call, and first we'd go on international calls, but we'd be on national calls, we'd be on local calls, regional calls that we called them. We'd learn from each other. So that was really positive. I'll go back to my difference across the country and how different experiences happened. So there was definitely learning from the Birmingham area for the other areas around.
Well, that's because you were the biggest. One of the biggest.
One of the biggest impacted was because, unlike cities where there are lots of commuters and people travel out and don't necessarily live in those cities, in Birmingham it's a very residential city. So people lived and worked in the same area, and as I say, it's one of the youngest cities as well. Yeah. So the impact of COVID was quite pronounced. So we learned lots of what to do and what not to do, and I think it all started with having a plane flown in from the cruise ships in the Caribbean very early on, and I didn't think in my nursing career I found myself stood on a runway in Birmingham Airport, but nevertheless that's where I was one morning, and as the chief nurse receiving an aeroplane in and going on the aeroplane and talking to people that were very frightened about the situation. It was an American airline that had flown people back. The reason why it landed in Birmingham was because we're there's only 2 or 3 airports in the country that have got let me get the technology right. I've got somewhere big enough to land one of these big jumbos that had come in, and it was a Royal Air Force. American Airlines. Now I'm going to have to get that right. So it's an American. What's the forces called? American, not Royal Air Force. American. It's the American Air Force.
Anyone?
Air Force, yeah.
Yeah. So it was an American Air Force plane. It was huge. There was no creature comforts in there. Nobody going up and down with the drinks trolley. It was very, very basic.
And that's from a cruise liner.
And that came from a cruise liner to fetch everybody off and into Birmingham. They landed, and our job was to get these people home. So we've got a hugely infectious disease. We know little about it at this point, if it's spread, because it's very early on in COVID. We had to cohort people in a local hotel foyer and then distribute those people back to where they'd come from, back to their homes.
So they were from the UK, though?
They were all from the UK.
Right.
They lived and breathed. They'd been on holiday in the Caribbean. They were frightened. They'd been isolated on a cruise ship. They came back, and then some of them they've landed in Birmingham. Some of them lived in Leicester, Coventry, Nottingham. So all around that region. There were some people from London that had to get back to London. The interesting thing at that point was my job in that was to record everybody's name, contact trace everybody after. So me and my team would contact trace everybody to make sure they were all right after they'd got in. This is before the vaccinations.
Yeah.
So those people had to go back to their homes. We had to get taxis. Of course, we got to PPE the taxi driver. to get the taxi driver to take the people individually back to their own homes. And then we had to follow them up, working very closely with the local authority, working very closely with my colleagues in public health. We were able to do this very efficiently and to make sure that those people received the care that they needed when they returned home. So that was an interesting part of my career that I couldn't have written when I was that student nurse at 18 in Leeds. So learning from that and having to speak nationally back to the audience that we talked about a minute ago on the Zoom calls about that experience. So there was some learning there was very interesting and quite career defining, I would say. One of the moments that you have, those moments in your career.
So you're there, and we're right in the thick of COVID now. So it's all coming out. It's gaining momentum. We get to, was it March 20th? March
19th, when we received the call to tell everybody we're going in lockdown. The announcement was coming that evening. So we had a Zoom call with the Department of Health to tell us that we were locking down. And I think Boris went about 8 o'clock, didn't he, that evening?
Did, yeah. So what did that look like for Helen Jenkinson, that time?
So...
At that point?
At that point, the lockdown point.
Yeah, because remember, you're a mom, a wife,
I understood the lockdown.
But knowing what you knew, which was far more than we all knew, take me back to that moment.
Your first priority is to safeguard your loved ones.
Of course.
So we talked about bubbles at the time. And my mother was alone. My father had died. So my priority was to make sure she was safe. So she came into my bubble, and that's where she stayed, which had its challenges, but that's where she stayed. For me, my daughter is a teacher, so she went to school and she taught. And she continued to teach, and she looked after all the children of the nurses and the doctors and the health visitors and everybody else in school, and carried on teaching. She became very annoyed with the people that were cleaning the cars and sitting in the gardens, but she taught all the way through, and I worked all the way through. And it was 7 days a week, 17 hours a day working, whether that's on Teams calls or vaccinating on a Sunday afternoon in a GP practice. That's what we did. And we all did it, whether you were in the Frontline working in A&E, or you were in coronary care, or you were in a care home, or you were in, like myself, in commissioning. The care home, I suppose one of the shout outs that I've got really is one of the things that we all talked about frontline workers, and we stood outside on a Thursday and clapped everybody. But there was an awful lot of work that went on in the background that, whilst we hadn't got the sexy blue light flashing and people dashing in ambulances to places, and those people that were working in ITU, which, all credit to everybody that did what they did, absolutely. There was an engine behind that facilitated the PPE, that facilitated all the work that they needed to do, that facilitated what they could and couldn't do, the vaccination programme. And that was... once it reached our operational level in our region, was an extremely efficient and effective method of doing things. The directive that came from government lost the nuances that needed to happen in the regions. And that's an important lesson learned. You can't give out a blanket instruction to people in the Peak District in Cornwall and in an urban conurbation. There's got to be nuances to facilitate the people that you need to work with. For example, working with people that English is not their first language. So understanding and explaining the safeguards around COVID, the personal protective equipment and the vaccination programme was completely different to somebody that speaks English as their first language. And we have to be able to adopt that and understand it. Cultural beliefs and misgivings and suspicions around vaccinations, that was all sat with the responsibility of me and my team and the colleagues we worked with in public health and in the local authorities and with the hospitals to help people to understand that this was safe, it was the way forward, it was what we needed to do to protect everybody, and using different language, different methods of communication, none of which was described in Downing Street.
No.
But all of which happened in the local conurbation of Digbeth in the middle of Birmingham, or the Black Country. Or
so, I think what I want to try and is take you back to knowing all of this thing and how you coped with that. I know you went into automatic pilot because I know you as a person.
Yeah.
But knowing that you've got your mum and your daughter and your son
and
your husband, because he was in health as well, wasn't he?
He was in health, yeah. He retired at the start, just about 3 months into COVID, actually, and I was grateful of that because he could do the home front, if you like.
Yeah.
I believe that my background in infectious diseases helped me to be very real, knowing and trusting that we would get a vaccine and we would be able to deal with this. And I'm not sure every nurse or every doctor behind me and the generations behind me and those that had never been exposed or had that infectious disease acute understanding quite got that. I don't know whether it's a bit of blind trust that I got in the fact that we'd found a vaccination for measles. Let's crack on. We can find a vaccination, and it was almost like an absolute trust and confidence in what I understood to be our health service in the UK.
So that got you through it.
I had absolutely no doubt that we'd be the first to get the vaccination up and running because I know how fantastic we are in our universities and in our laboratories. I had absolutely trust and confidence in the technology, the science, and the NHS. Absolute trust.
So that's fine for you, but what about your colleagues? What about those nurses, the janitor, the this, the that? Because it was frightening for us as a general public, but in the homes, in the nursing homes, how do you cope with that?
So I can speak with confidence around this because what we did as a group of regional chief nurses, so for every area, the Warwickshires, the Leicestershires, the Coventrys, the York, whatever area it was, we talked, all of us, together. We had informal and formal conversations. So we helped support our care homes and help them. Again, in my area, the same in many areas, English isn't always the first language of people that work in care homes, and they were terrified. They were absolutely terrified.
Of course they were.
So we spent a lot of time that wasn't shared, that didn't know, that people didn't understand, in and out of hours. So in the night, going in and meeting with the night shift, working to go and talk to people at the weekends, talk to different shifts and day shifts, and to try and help people understand what they could do in their area, in their home, to help keep them safe. I had an awful lot of care homes that were COVID-free, that closed the doors, kept the staff in, and kept their residents safe. An awful lot of care homes that were clean and COVID-free.
However,
until
then the decision was made, wasn't it?
A decision was made to discharge people into care homes from acute hospitals. And that decision was made by the Department of Health. And that decision was questioned by many nurses in my position and our teams. And I can go on camera and believe that that was absolutely the wrong decision. Knowing that the COVID inquiry is going on at the moment, I would think that that decision will be arrived at.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But we were in very dangerous times.
This is your, and I must say, this is your experience of it.
My experience.
Which is why we're having this chat. Okay, so then, and I take on board everything on that, because I think that's quite a... it's very emotive.
We have to see what comes out of the COVID
and we'll
inquiry.
have to wait and see.
And we have to remember, Ange, we were working in strange times.
Absolutely.
We'd never ever worked in those strange times. Decisions were made. They were sometimes made in haste, sometimes made with lack of information, and sometimes made with every bit of information.
I think it then goes back to, you make the decision, going back to my mum and the vaccinations. It's about making the decision at the time, isn't it?
With the proper information.
Yeah. So then, from my opinion, from me as a general, Joe Blogs, the decision, obviously COVID was it was very intense, wasn't it? It reached a crescendo. And then as soon as, it seemed to just go as quickly as it came.
Has it?
So did it? Has it?
There's no doubt that as a general population, we worked hard, collaboratively together and joined forces. And I believe that everybody sticking, as many people as possible, sticking to the rules and looking after each other, looking out for each other. It's almost like a wartime.
What, still?
At the time of COVID, it's almost like a wartime narrative, wasn't it?
It was like a war cry, wasn't it?
It was all for one, working together, being together and doing the best, looking out for your neighbours. I mean, how many times did you see things on your local news where people were sat out on their front gardens chatting to the neighbours they'd never even spoken to before? I don't doubt that there was a coming together that helped us get through COVID. Yeah. Absolutely. There were dark times, there were difficult times. We talk about the generation of the younger people where they were locked away and couldn't talk to each other. Yeah. I mean, I feel sorry for them because they could talk to each other on social media. I mean, back in the 70s, you couldn't even phone anybody. But anyway, I think it was a very difficult time, and I think we did the best we could with the information that we got. Do I believe that we would do the same again? I think the basic British way of doing things is that, yes, we would. We'd help each other and come together again. I think there will be another infection outbreak. Like, I'm not going to say another pandemic because I haven't got a crystal ball. No. But I'm saying we will have to deal with infections again on a scale. We will, because we're humans and we love a bit of infection, don't we? But I think we've dealt with things and we'll deal with things again. And I hope that we listen and learn from the COVID pandemic and learn what was good and take it and learn what we could have done better. The decision then for me was, have I had enough now? Is this the end of my NHS career?
So we need to cut that part because I'm going to ask this question. So obviously the title of this podcast is called Now What? Mm-hmm. So I'm interested, I mean, I'm not being funny. Anybody with what you've experienced, even, I think that must have been the end of it. However, I'm interested to know, now what? So you've gone COVID, you've done all that. Then you must have asked yourself, what was the thing that made you go, now what?
So anybody that knows me knows that I lived and breathed my career.
I know you did.
You cut me open, it reads NHS. Lived and breathed the NHS and health and well-being and public health and people. And nurses can retire, or could, if you're as old as me. You could retire at 55, and there was no way I was retiring at 55. You're still a baby. Why would you retire at 55? And then COVID happened in my 55th year. And my decisions changed because I realised that whilst it was very magnanimous to have NHS running through your blood, there was more to life, really, and I needed to do different things. I needed to perhaps spend a bit more time looking at what I could do with my family, what I could do with my husband, who'd recently retired.
Because I think it's very true to say that you and I are cut from very much the same cloth. In terms of your career came first, and your children and your husband and your family came
absolutely
a poor second, really. And I think that's very true to say. So, but that's quite a big thing from going full pelt to then
stepping off like that,
thinking about your family.
Overnight decision. So I thought I was going to really struggle with it, but then I started to ask around, and women my age in my exact role in another part of the country had made the same decision.
Right, okay.
Which I found fascinating because they were the career junkies as well. They were exactly the same as me. They were never going to give up. And people floated, oh, I'll do a bit of consultancy, or I'll go and do some private work. But nobody's doing anything. They've just taken a decision.
Because I know you went into consultancy in a way, didn't you?
And I still dabble a little bit, but I did do a little bit for a couple of years because I think it's easier to ease out, isn't it?
It is.
But it's because you've still got quite a lot to offer. You've always got a lot to
course you
offer.
have.
But the decision now is about future and what can I do differently? Learning new skills, learning to do things differently, travelling more, and you know, trying to look at where else can I bring some benefit? What else have I got to offer? So I've joined a lot of women's groups. I do some fundraising for various charities. I spend a bit of time with colleagues and friends and family.
Yeah.
I've learned to play netball. which isn't a sight everybody wants to see, but I spend a bit more time at the gym. So I'm doing the things that I always couldn't fit in when I was working. And do I look back and regret buying the Mr. Kipling's mince pies instead of home baking the mince pies for the Christmas bazaar? Do I look back and regret just arriving in time to see the nativity play? Do I regret dropping the kids off before probably their teachers are out of bed? No, because they're strong, fit individuals that have been created from what life brought them through me. But they are both ambitious and work hard and must have learnt some of the good stuff. Do I worry about the NHS going forward? I worry that we will lose. I worry that we will lose the goodwill. Integrity
is how I look at this. Because anyway, I'm putting words into you and I don't want to say the goodwill. So what I want to ask you, so just say 5 years down the line, along comes the next something. Do they pick the phone up and talk to you?
That's a good question. I think I'm here. I intend to keep informed.
Yeah.
And if my country needs me, Ange, I will help.
Of course I will. That's the answer then, isn't it? I'm just interested to know that.
Yeah.
Because of course it's okay jumping off the precipice, and I've done it. But actually, now what?
Yeah.
If that happens.
If I'm needed and if I'm relevant and if I'm not a burden.
Yeah.
Because sometimes when you're too long out of retirement and people bring you back, you can be less than helpful.
Okay, get that.
So yes, in 5 years' time, if it happened again, of course, I would break the glass, take out my uniform, and go into battle. However, you have to be conscious of your own limitations and how helpful you can be, because to be cynical and critical isn't helpful. You've got to be energetic and informed and relevant to be able to be supportive of the people that are coming through. That I still support a lot of young nurses that are coming through for advice, information, career development. I still help out a lot of nurses that are going through difficult times and give them the advice and experience I've got in my career. I still support people that have complaints about their care.
Yeah.
And all I can be is objective and not subjective, which is very difficult when you've been in the job as long as I have. So all I can be is objective and informative and supportive to those people.
The only reason I've asked you that is because obviously, as an estate agent, ex-estate agent, I feel exactly the same.
Yeah.
You're there and you would step in if you feel you're useful, but I agree. Everybody has
a shelf life.
Has a shelf life.
Yeah, they do.
Stamped on the bottom of your foot.
And I think it's
What's the date then, love?
I think 5 years is your limit. I think, you know,
I agree.
You become part of the problem if you don't stay relevant. And no, you know, and we need to move aside. Young people are the future. They're our future, and we need to invest in those coming forward. The young nurses in their 20s and 30s need to have the same career experience that I've had, which has been outstanding.
So I know that you're now what moment you've actually doing a PhD in exactly this. So can you talk to me about that?
So from nurse to doctor, I'm about to submit my PhD, which is around the stories of nurses behind the front lines during the COVID crisis.
Wow, and that's a bombshell.
Indeed.
Will that be a book in there, Helen, do you think?
There's a publication in every PhD, Ange, so I will be in newsstands near you.
Fine, you've heard that first. If you want to get buying the book when it comes out, there'll be a link somewhere along the line. So, wise old sage Helen at the age of 50 odd plus, advice. So if you were to come across somebody in a quandary at a crossroads, very difficult thing to ask anybody, but I'm going to ask it you anyway. What would your advice be?
I think you've got to listen you've got to listen to your head and not your heart.
Okay.
Definitely. So let's go back. If I was my 18-year-old self, would I be a nurse again? 100%. Would I choose a different career? Never. Would I do exactly the same again? Yes. Would I finish at 55 if there hadn't been a COVID outbreak and a pandemic? I don't know. I don't know. I've seen too many people go on too long.
I get that.
And I want to be fit and able to enjoy my retirement. I've seen people finish work and die the next day.
Yeah.
I've nursed 65 plus 1 year olds that have died. I have nursed 99-year-olds, but I would make the decision to have a fit second part of my life every time.
Yeah.
I read the books I want to read now. I only ever read about infectious diseases and other issues to do with nursing and safeguarding and all those issues that we deal with. Do I still prick my ears up when the NHS is being talked about? Do I still read the policies that come down and have a look? Yeah, I do. That'll go.
But now it's about you, isn't it?
But now it's about me. It's about being my healthiest and happiest I can be for the next few years of my life.
Well, Helen, as I knew it would be, thank you so much, and I wish you all the best in whatever is to come in the future.
Thank you. Thanks, Angie.
Nailed.